Hello, welcome to this Green Open Homes Retrofit Stories webinar. My name is Vic Wakefield-Jarrett. I'm a senior project worker in the local and community empowerment team at Centre for Sustainable Energy. I'm joined today by my colleagues Charlotte and Jack. Charlotte, Jack, do you want to unmute and say hello?
I'm Jack Lloyd. I'm a retrofit assessor in the future-proof team at CSE. I'll just be talking a little bit about basics of the approach to sustainable retrofit and the future-proof service that we offer.
And I'm Charlotte. I work in the communications team at CSE as communications project officer, and yeah, I was involved with the filming of some of the videos that you'll see a little bit later.
So we know from previous Green Open Homes events that CSE has been involved in that hearing first-hand experience is an important factor in helping people begin their retrofit journeys, deciding what they want to do and having the confidence to start. We hope these virtual events will be able to do just that, to inspire people to take action. I just say that we are looking to open discussion and share knowledge rather than recommending any particular measures or installers or brands of products. Every home will be different, both in how it's manufactured, but also how it's used and what the demand for energy is in that home. So we won't be able to give you bespoke advice here today for each of your own homes, but we hope that hearing the experience of our 2 example homes will be inspiring and helpful in some way. I should just say that CSE wanted to do this project, and so we applied for government funding through the Community Renewal Funding through the West of England Combined Authority to run these webinars. So we're grateful to them for funding it and allowing it to take place. Because it has been funded through the West of England Combined Authority, that has been the focus of these webinars, so Bristol, Bath, South Gloucestershire. So some of the links that we'll be sharing will be specific to that area. However, hopefully it will be of interest to anybody across the country. We will try to answer questions throughout. If you write them in the chat box, we'll stop. If we are able to answer them quickly, we'll do so. Otherwise, we'll take them at the end. Just to say, if your question hasn't been answered, we will be making a list of everything that was in the chat box, and we will try to send out some useful resources to address common issues after the event. So tonight's webinar focuses on 2 homes built in the 1920s and 30s. This is our final of 3 webinars. The previous webinars, one looked at 19th century homes and one looked at later houses built in the 1970s. After tonight, sometime next week, we will circulate recordings of all the webinars. They'll also be available on our YouTube channel. So finally, just want to say a big thank you to Judith and Matt, who have kindly volunteered to be part of this project and are joining us here today from our showcase homes. Judith, Matt, would you like to just say hello briefly? Oh, you're on mute, Judith. Sorry. Maybe Matt, if you're ready, just say hello.
There we are.
Oh, there we go.
Yes, hello. I'm Judith. Mine is the yellow house.
Thanks, Judith. And Matt, just say hello.
Hi, everyone. Mine's the other one.
So just before I continue, I'm just going to launch a poll. You should see a little questionnaire pop up on your screen, just to give us an idea of who people are in the room, what stage you're at in your retrofit journey. Yeah, just good for us to have a perspective. We'll try and cover something for everybody. If you typed other on the poll, maybe type in the chat if you've got a reason or something to share on that. So we look a pretty even split of the 55 people who've participated. Thank you. Third, beginning. Oh, I can share the results, can't I? Share results. So yeah, you should be able to see it's pretty evenly split between those who are beginning to think about retrofit, those who are keen to retrofit but haven't started, and those who have installed some measures but are keen to do more. Somebody who's just recently finish their retrofit. Excellent. If you're still here for the Q&A section at the end, so you'll be welcome to share some of your experiences there. Great. Okay. Let me just go back to sharing my screen. 1 second. So I should just mention that CSE is a charity supporting people and organisations across the UK to tackle the climate emergency and ending the suffering caused by cold homes. CSE do this through sharing our knowledge, practical experience and policy insights. For over 40 years, we've supported people to take effective action on energy in their homes. And we also help communities and local councils to understand energy issues, set priorities and put plans into action. Additionally, we have a research and analysis team, and that focuses on making the energy system greener, smarter and fairer. There's plenty more information about us and lots of advice on our website, which is cse.org.uk. Some really brief Zoom functions. Hopefully you're all aware by now. You've managed to make it onto the call, so that's a great first step. Just say that please keep yourself on mute. We are recording this webinar, so if you don't wish your face to be included, maybe turn off your video. If you do want to ask a question, please write it in the chat. You should be able to see a screen towards a bar towards the bottom of your screen with that function. Also on this bar there should be a reactions clip, which will allow you to raise your hand to ask a question in person. And top right, you should have speaker view. You should have a little box which you can choose speaker view or gallery view. You might want to flip between them when there's a presentation to get an optimal screen. Next slide. Okay, so this is our agenda today. We are going to have a short presentation from my colleague Jack on future-proof and the principles of retrofit. And then we'll move on to sharing Judith's story. So Jack, if you can get ready to share your screen, I'm just going to stop mine now. Should. Excellent. You're still on mute.
Sorry, just a second. There we go. Right. Has everyone got my slides now?
Yes. Yeah.
Great. So yeah, I'm just going to give a short presentation about the sort of basics of low carbon retrofit. And then, yes, basically just go through some of the basics of the services that Future-Proof offer as retrofit advice. So in this presentation, I will cover the whole house and fabric first approaches to sustainable retrofit of buildings, how to understand your home a little bit better about different things that you have to consider when retrofitting your building, the different funding streams that are available to homeowners for retrofit measures, how to find contractors online, and introduction into CSE's Future-Proof project, which offers in-depth retrofit advice. So a little bit more about the reason of sort of why we need to retrofit buildings in the first place, which I'm sure a lot of you are already aware, but just taking a quick look at that. 14% of the total UK greenhouse gas emissions are from household energy use, and that includes electricity consumption, space and water heating. This is the equivalent emissions from all UK aviation and waste combined, and the UK also has some of the worst performing housing stock in Europe, with 45% of our existing dwellings being rated at Energy Performance Certificate Band D, and 19% rated as E or lower. So that's really not a great state to be in, so we do need to improve those. And yeah, with approximately 80% of all buildings that will be in use in 2050 being built already, it's clear that the energy efficiency of our current building stock needs to be improved if we are ever going to meet net zero. So that's a bit about why we're doing this. Yeah, where to start? The whole house approach. So the whole house approach is a best practice method of undertaking the sustainable retrofit of buildings. The main aspect of this approach is that it considers the building fabric, building services, occupancy, ventilation requirements, location, amongst a lot of other things of the building all together, rather than just installing different measures in a sort of piecemeal way separately. So the reason for considering the whole building together is that if you don't do that, you might end up having some unintended negative consequences. So, for example, if you're insulating your building to make it more thermally efficient, which is a good idea, but you're not following the whole house approach, you may first think of just sort of hiring a contractor to do some loft insulation, and maybe later down the line do some solid wall insulation, and then come later to do some underfloor insulation, for example. And if you consider each of those measures individually, it might not have a negative effect on the building, but when taken together as a package, you're much more likely to make the building very airtight, and therefore potentially need more deliberate ventilation to avoid issues of condensation or build up of pollutants inside the building. So if you take the whole house approach, you could, for instance, look at if it's in an area which is at high risk of radon, because if you increase the airtightness of the building and there's a sort of small amount of radon being released from the ground, then that could get trapped into the building. So if you do that first off, then you can prevent that from happening by installing a radon barrier early on. But that's just one sort of example of why you'd want to take the whole house into consideration. You'd also want to consider the current condition of the property, because you don't want to lock in problems and make them worse. So issues such as water ingress due to driving rain could be covered up by adding internal wall insulation, for example. But then that could also make it worse because the problem's still there, but you're just covering it up, and that water could get trapped behind that insulation layer. So it's always best practice to fix those issues first. That might seem like common sense, but yes. So you also have to consider the best order of measures. So, for example, if you're planning some solid wall insulation, but your windows are sort of quite old and they need replacing, it's a good idea to get those windows replaced first, because if you're removing those windows after you've got some nice external solid wall insulation installed, you might be at risk of damaging that wall insulation, or it's a harder, more difficult process. So that's a good thing to consider. And you'll also need to consider the vapor permeability of the existing building fabric. So if you've got a solid masonry wall which is designed to be vapor permeable, it's always good to use an insulation material that's also vapor permeable, as that will allow the vapor, the air moisture, to pass through the building and let it breathe, in inverted commas, and therefore you're less likely to have condensation risk inside the building. So yeah, this is just a few different examples as to why you need to take the whole building into account rather than just doing a sort of one-size-fits-all approach to retrofitting your property. So alongside the whole house approach is the fabric first approach, or the energy hierarchy. So the main principle here being that you first want to reduce the amount of energy you use through simple changes, such as behavior in your home. So that's just basic energy conservation, top of the hierarchy. Then you want to improve the energy efficiency of your building fabric, appliances and heating systems. So that's the energy efficiency layer. And then finally, you want to think about adding renewable energy generation to your home. So it's very tempting for homeowners to think of renewables such as solar PV first, and there's not necessarily a huge problem with doing that. That's not necessarily going to interfere later down the line, but it's actually the most climate friendly thing you can do to use one less unit of energy for heating than generate 1 unit of renewable energy. So if you live in the west of England, you can call CSE's free advice line for tips on how to conserve energy. And they also give information on grant funding for retrofit measures. But if you don't qualify for any of the grant funding, we've also got some paid for future-proof services, which I'll come on to in a bit. So yeah, moving on to the funding. So non-means tested funding, which means the funding that's available to everyone, irrelevant of their income. There's not loads available, but here is a few that stick out. So the boiler upgrade scheme, which has just started on the 1st of April and replaces the renewable heat incentive, is set up by national government to encourage householders to install new low carbon heating systems such as heat pumps and, in some rarer instances, biomass boilers. The grant will provide up to £5,000 off an air source heat pump and up to £6,000 off a ground source heat pump. The fund is a fixed pot that should provide enough funding to help out 90,000 homes. So if people are interested in getting this funding, the advice is to start now on your retrofit project, because it probably won't be around for very long. I mean, it's anyone's guess how long it will last, but 90,000 is not huge in the scale of the whole of the UK. The scheme is applied for by the heat pump installers, so there's very little admin that a householder will have to do in order to get the funding. Although there is an additional energy performance certificate that is required. It needs to be up to date, and needs to show that you don't need any more loft insulation or cavity wall insulation. So if you've got both of those, or if you don't have a cavity wall, you've got a solid wall, then you just need to get an up-to-date EPC, and then you will be eligible. The Smart Export Guarantee for microgeneration is what has replaced the feed-in tariff, which you might have heard of before. So this is where energy suppliers are obliged to pay a fee for the electricity which is exported back to the grid. And they're typically a lot lower in value than the old feed-in tariff, and companies have been offering around 5p per kilowatt hour. But since the energy crisis, which is obviously a bad thing, the wholesale price of electricity has gone up. So some electricity suppliers are offering higher rates, such as 12 and 14p. So you can get a bit more money back for your generation. And yeah, some local authorities are offering low interest loans for energy efficiency measures, such as Lendology in the southwest, but obviously that's a loan rather than any kind of grant. So yeah. Means tested funding. So we've got the Home Upgrade Grant Scheme, and that's again central government funded, but it's means tested for householders that earn less than £30,000 in total. So that's everyone's earnings from within the home. It's mostly for off-gas properties, but there's lots of different measures that are available. So yeah, wall and roof insulation, floor insulation, heat pump installs, solar PV, but a lot of different measures available. But the grant amount depends on the energy performance certificate, with a cutoff at energy performance certificate D, band D. So at D you get a certain amount, and then sort of E, F, G get more. Yeah, the energy company obligation is funding from fuel suppliers, and Eco4, so that's energy company obligation 4, has just started for March this year, provides a range of different measures for roof, wall and floor insulation types, and they're available to those on various different benefits, but can also be accessed if you're not in receipt of benefits, if you pass certain criteria set by your local authority, and they change per local authority. So if you're interested in that, you can call CSE's advice line if you're in the Southwest. Then yeah, we can advise on that. But yes, that is that. And yes, the end of this, the SSEN Enabling Works Fund. This is to enable you to access the other forms of funding. So, for example, if you've got a loft which has got lots of, you're storing a lot of things in there and you can't move those out yourself, but you know are on benefits and you would like that to be installed, then you can get SSEN to pay for the removal of the items that are being stored. So it's small, it's like small interventions that allow you to access the other grants. But you have to be in the SSEN, which is a area, which is a district network operator. So it's within the electricity providers areas. So yeah, moving on to Future Proof, which is the project that is run by the Centre for Sustainable Energy. It was initially set up as a free service paid for by national government again, but the funding unfortunately finished in March 2021. So we now have to charge for our services, but the main aim of this project is to help homeowners make energy saving improvements and yes, install retrofit measures with confidence. So a little bit more about the different services we provide. So there's the introductory retrofit guide. This goes through the basic principles of retrofit for clients at the start of their retrofit journey. So for this service, one of our advisors will provide a telephone consultation regarding the client's property and discuss the different measures that are likely to be appropriate. And then they will be sent a summary document with different information about all the measures that have been discussed. Then a little bit more detailed is the full survey and retrofit coordination plan, which provides a detailed report after one of our trained retrofit assessors will visit the property and take various different measurements of the building and insulation materials, and then build a mathematical model based on the information that's collected that will try to emulate the heat loss of that property as accurately as possible. And then that baseline model will be edited with different retrofit scenarios to try and reduce the heat demand as much as possible. Heat demand being, the energy required to heat your building to a sufficient temperature. So the client can then see how much energy they would save with each different scenario. And the final report will give an overview of the project brief, the existing condition of the property, an outline of the proposed retrofit scenarios, a detailed summary of the specific measures that are necessary to achieve those retrofit scenarios, and a final section on next steps. And for later down the line with your retrofit project, there's planning appeal advice. So if you've applied for planning permission for some home improvements and been refused, you can get advice on how and when to appeal these decisions from our expert planning consultant based at CSE. There's also project management service where CSE can help with coordinating contractors and ensure a high quality of work on the retrofit project. There's also on-site inspection and sign-off where one of our qualified retrofit coordinators will inspect the installation and sign it off to say that it has been installed to a high standard. And then if a client wishes to purchase any of these services, they will also have access to the future-proof associated builders list, which is just a list of builders and service providers who have undertaken training in sustainable retrofit of buildings, so you can trust that they know what they're doing. So yeah, for other ways of finding contractors though are these different websites. So these organizations certify different service providers that have gone through certain accreditation processes. The Trustmark website at the top is a good place to start, as you can find electricians, builders, and various other tradespeople who work to a high standard. Then there's the National Insulation Association, which specialises in insulation, surprisingly enough. and the microgeneration certification scheme certifies installers of various low carbon technologies such as solar photovoltaics, wind power, heat pumps, and battery storage, amongst others. But it's very good. You should really find an installer which is MCS certified if you're going to get sort of air source heat pump or solar PV installed. That's best practice. There's also lots of free resources on the CSE website, lots of different PDF documents on different measures. So there's a few on there's air source heat pumps, internal, external, and cavity wall insulation, loft insulation, solid and suspended floor insulation, and lots of other things. So here's just a few sort of examples on there. I know you can't see it very well probably, but yeah, it's a good source of free advice. And other useful resources, these should be able to be shared with you in the chat or after the presentation, but they're all really useful sources of information if you're embarking on your retrofit journey and you just want to find some advice online. These are all really great resources, so that can be shared with you after. Yeah, and if you don't live in the west of England, but you sort of like the sound of Futureproof and some of the services on offer there, there's also the 7&Y Energy Agency in Gloucester and Wye Valley. Yeah, Carbon Co-op in Manchester and surrounding areas, and the others on the list here. But that's just a sort of select few. So, you know, there may be, if you're not in any of those areas, there may be an organisation offering a very similar service. So yeah, have a look online, give it a quick Google. That's it. So yeah, get in touch if you have any questions. That's my email and the Futureproof email. And yes, there's also the Futureproof phone number if you want to leave us a message. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jack. That's great. Hopefully that gave an overview to people. There was one question in the chat, Jack, about how much the plans cost. Are you able to give a rough estimate of what the paid for plans would cost?
Yeah, so it's a bit difficult at the moment because we've got some reductions in price in certain areas, so it will depend on your area and the size of property, but sort of around, if you've got a small 2-bedroom property, it can be sort of between £200 and £400 depending on your area, or yeah, if you've got a larger property, maybe 4-bedroom, then between £400 and £800, I think, but that also may be coming down in the very near future. So, okay.
So and all that's listed on our on the Futureproof website, isn't it?
Yeah.
Great, thanks, Jack. Okay, we're going to move on to Judith's case study now. So yeah, Judith's home is a terraced house in Bristol, in the Horfield area, built in the 1920s. So I am just going to share a video. Tests my capabilities. Here we go. Okay. So hopefully you can see this video.
This house was actually built in 1927. We've been here about 12 years. And
sorry, everybody, I'm just going to try and move this far away from you. Great. Let me start that again.
At the time, Hello, I'm Judith and I live in Westbury Park. This house was actually built in 1927. We've been here about 12 years. And at the time, the previous house I'd put solar panels on, so I knew I wanted those here. Somebody said heat pump, okay, insulation. So we went for insulation and had the lovely choice of colours, and that is the result. As you can see, the skill of the workman involved burying a lot of the downpipes, and in fact I think it's incredibly clever. It doesn't always work, sometimes you have to have them built out, but the insulation is about that thick, And so in this case, which is the downpipes from the lavatories, you only see half a drain pipe, which is quite nice. It's very precise the way they do it, and all the edges are clean. And this is the insulation. It's sort of like Rice Krispies. And at the beginning, I thought, oh, this is going to be terrible because it crumbles. But in fact, it also sticks together. So they're cutting it, but it's not sort of just flying around because it is, after all, some sort of polystyrene. The heat pump is now installed. Very quiet. People say, oh, you can hear it from miles away. No, you can't. We decided to do this sort of thing because of the environment. I mean, there's no question of it. And also that the house, I thought, would benefit a lot from insulation in particular, because it's terribly hot in the summer and could be terribly cold in the winter, and this sort of evens out the temperature. But I'm a member of the Bristol Energy Network and also Sustainable Westbury on Trim, and we've been doing work with both of these places. And somebody suggested part of CSE, which is future proof, and I got in touch and we had a long conversation, and he was very helpful. I started looking into this because my neighbour across the road had the insulation done, and whilst the workmen were there, I got them to come and have a look, and they said, yes, we can do it. And there was the Green Homes grant, and I got 50% roughly of the cost, which I thought was brilliant. And then for the heat pump, the system has changed, and now everybody can have £5,000 towards the installation, which must be about 35%, something like that. And this money is claimed by the installers themselves.
Thanks, Judith, for allowing myself and Charlotte to come and film in your house. Judith, did you want to add any extra details about your retrofit journey?
We started right at the beginning in 2009 when I moved into this house. We put on an extra front door. That was the beginning of thinking, aha, we better get on with something, because we felt as if we're standing in the hall on the phone and thinking your ankles are being cut off. So that was the first thing we did. And then I came across the Cheese Project. They did a thermal imaging study of the house and pointed out that the windows were rubbish. So they were 25-year-old double glazing. So we changed those, but we are going back a bit. So the interesting thing about the cladding is we've now had it for 10 months. So we've been through the winter and been through the summer, and it makes such a difference. And we keep the house very cold. Most people would think it's not quite right, but 18 degrees is plenty. And in the winter, it hardly ever got below that. So the heating wasn't clicking in. And now it's terribly hot outside, and provided, because in the morning we get the sun in the back, and then the evening, like now, it's coming in the front, and you just have to run around and close curtains and blinds and things and open the other windows. But it seems to me, and I'm a bit heat sensitive and I can't sleep and things, it just seems like a magic trick, and we can't hear the heat pump. So if anyone's got any questions, I have no idea. I don't know what the solar panels cost now, but I put mine in 2011. That was £11,000, but the ones I'd put in 3 years previously had been 14,000 for the same amount of panels. So they're clearly going down, and the generation actually paid for our electricity and gas before.
Great, thanks, Judith. If anyone does have any questions for Judith, please write them in the chat. And once we've heard from Matt about his house, we'll open up to questions about about all of both the houses. So I'm conscious of time, so we'll push on and I'll show you the video we made of Matt's house next, and then he will tell you a little bit more about the house. So let me just share.
No longer available, but they're
Hopefully everyone can see this.
Hi there, my name's Matt and welcome to my house. It's a 1930s mid-terrace. I've done various measures like solar panels, you can see, and heat pump and underfloor insulation, underfloor heating, and a battery. And my main motivation is climate change. I'm an energy consultant. I've been working in climate change for about 12, 13 years now. So reducing my carbon was the primary thing, but also because I'm an energy consultant, it's really useful to understand actually how these measures work in practice. This is the air source heat pump, the external unit. It's a Mitsubishi EcoDan 8.5 kilowatts, and inside there's the hot water cylinder which it feeds into. It's not particularly, well, you certainly can't hear it inside. It's not noisy inside. Obviously it's got a fan in it, so if it's on when you're outside then you will hear it, but I've never heard it from the inside. At the moment there's no heating on, so it'll only come on once a day or so to top up the hot water. In the middle of winter it might be on most of the daytime. On the roof you can see the solar panels. There's actually solar panels on the other side as well. It's a east-west facing roof, and there's 4 kilowatts in total, 2.5 on this side, 1.5 on the other. They were actually one of the first things I did back in 2012, so they're about 10 years old now, so I've got a really good understanding of how well they're performing. And then last year I installed a smart battery system. So before I was probably using about 20% of the energy from the panels, and then the rest of it was going back into the grid. And now I'm using closer to 50. So this is the smart battery. It's by a company called Moixa, and it's 4.8 kilowatt hours. And it's a smart battery, so what it will do is it will, if the sun is shining and I'm not using enough energy in the house, it will charge the battery, and then it will discharge it in the evening when the sun's not shining and I'm using appliances. But it can also link with smart tariffs. So it can, if I've got a tariff which is say low cost overnight, then I can charge it up overnight at the low rate and then discharge it when I need it in the day. And it can also link to a smart export tariff, so it can decide whether it's more beneficial for me to use the energy in the house or to export it to the grid and get a better export rate. So when I bought the solar panels, I got the feed-in tariff. It wasn't on the best rate at the beginning, but it was still pretty good. So I'm about 10 years in now and have basically paid those back from the feed-in tariff. And actually that means I can put the feed-in tariff that I'm still getting for the next 15 years into things like the heat pump and the battery. The heat pump, I got the renewable heat incentive, which is no longer available, but there's a new grant called the boiler upgrade scheme. So my advice to people wanting to do work on the house is to plan things out well in advance. So even if you're not planning to do any works now, just kind of sit down and work out what measures you want to install, get some advice from the various websites or people or companies that you may know. What kind of insulation could you do? What the benefit's going to be, how much it's going to cost approximately. Focus on insulation as much as you can first.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt. Great. So yeah, Matt, if you wanted to just tell us a little bit more about your house now, if you had anything to add, and yeah, let me know if you want to go through the slides.
Sure. Yeah, do you want to go to the first slide? So I'm an energy consultant, so I've been collecting lots of data on my house over the years. So I thought I'd just show you some of the key figures. So the chart here is showing you the gas in orange and electricity in blue from when I moved into the house back in 2011. I was away for a couple of years, so there's a gap in the middle. The green is the PV, so I got that installed in 2012, and you can see the difference between the blue lines. 2011 to 12 is roughly the difference that made in terms of my using that PV in the house. And then I didn't have the money to do anything substantial until 2019, when I put in a secondary smart meter, so I could work out how much of that PV I was actually using in the house. That's the dark green, and that's also the light blue is how much the house is using, of which the dark green is from the PV. And then in 2020, I put in the heat pump, and that yellow is how much heat is produced, which would have previously been gas usage. And the table on the right shows you costs, so gas and electricity, and then you get an export tariff for the PV. Originally, I didn't have an export meter, so this was just estimated. And then in 2021, I got the battery, which allowed me to go onto a smart tariff so that I could get a different export tariff for every half hour of the day. And actually, because of the energy price rises, the export price also rose. You can see there's a huge difference in how much I managed to get from the export tariff last year. And then in terms of how much difference the heat pump made to the costs, it was about neutral. So you can see 2019 was just under £700, and 2020 was about the same. Do you want to go to the next slide? Yeah, and if you are interested in carbon, this is the carbon emissions. So started off about just over 2 tons. And then when I got the solar panels, because I was generating more than I was using, if you include the export carbon, then it actually went negative. Stayed around about the same, up and down a bit because of the weather and how much the PV was generating. And then when I got the heat pump and the battery, it's down to almost nothing now, including the export. And then costs. So the solar panels cost about 7,500 in 2012. They probably cost about 5,000 now for the same size system. It's gone down since. I had the feed-in tariff, which is no longer available. That gave me £750 a year and continues to do so for the next 15 years, plus the export tariff, which I already mentioned. So the fit's no longer available, but as Jack mentioned, you can get the smart export guarantee, which gives you some money for everything that you don't use in the house. I've got a secondary meter, so that basically allows me access to the data from my main supply meter. So that was mainly for interest. It didn't really save me any money. So that just gave me all the data to make these nice charts. The heat pump I had to kind of work it out because I paid for it all in one lump, but it was around about 12,000 for the heat pump. The underfloor heating, which was optional, but I wanted to insulate under the floor anyway. That was about £5,000, and that's mainly the labour and I've got a picture I'll show you. It's quite basic technology, but it's quite labour intensive. But I got about £5,000 grant for that, which the renewable heat incentive is no longer available, but you can get a similar grant called the boiler upgrade scheme. Put in underfloor insulation at the same time, so that's just solid insulation in between the joists. And then the battery storage I got last year was £3,000, but that was a discounted price because it was in a trial. I think the original price was about £4,000 or £5,000. It may have come down since. And I get about £50 income in that for when the battery operator has an agreement with the national grid to help balance the electricity grid. So they give me a share of that income. And also I can maximize the amount of the solar panels that I use. Next slide. So I'm not finished yet. Next things I want to do, I want to look at the ventilation and replace the windows at the same time with triple glazed. They're about 25 years old, the windows. They're double glazed, but they're not particularly great. I've got a particular problem with my front walls. The bay windows, the bricks in the bays are actually solid brick rather than cavity. The rest of the house is cavity. But it's not possible to insulate the loft above the bay because of the construction. So it's actually a bit of a cold spot within the house, and that's where I get the most condensation. Less so now, but worse before the radiator was moved. And similar to Judith, I get the sun in the morning in the back and the evening in the front, and actually overheating is my biggest problem at the moment. So I'm thinking about putting an external shutter on the back bedroom to limit that. Yeah, next slide. Then I've just got a few photos here. So this is the underfloor heating. You can see it's pretty basic. It's just pipes in these aluminium trays, which are slotted in between the joists, but it takes 2 men and several days to install because it's a bit fiddly. And that's just downstairs. Upstairs, this is before the insulation. You see what I mean about the bays. So this, sorry, go back one.
Sorry.
So you can see that mold growth there, and there was wood paneling on the front, which was installed by the previous owner, and discovered that when I took it off. And that's because the radiator was actually in the middle of the room rather than next to the window. And because it's a solid brick bay, it was actually creating a cold gradient across the room. You could actually feel it in the cold winters. And that's where the condensation formed. So I moved the radiator, if you move on one now. So I moved the radiator into that bay, so that keeps that wall warmer in the winter. Yeah, so that's one radiator. Next couple will just show the other radiators. So that's the other one. I did replace them all, but they were old anyway, and because I was moving them, it just made sense. They're about the same size as the previous ones, but they have 2 panels rather than single panels that you might see in older houses. Next one. Yeah, and that's the other bedroom. And I think that's it.
Great, thanks, Matt. That's excellent. So thanks very much for sharing that experience and those details. Hopefully they're really useful to everyone. We're going to move on to Q&A now. Just to say we've got around 20 minutes for questions, so do keep putting them in the chat. And Charlotte, are you ready to pick a couple of questions? We will probably start off with by just asking them and asking the relevant person to reply, but if we have time we might invite you to unmute and ask them in person.
Yeah, no worries. So we have a few questions coming in for you, Matt, if that's okay. So So someone's asking if you would be able to share what company you use for the underfloor insulation.
The heat pump installer actually did it through a subcontractor, so I can't remember exactly. It's not a difficult job. It's basically the solid insulation, and you just have to make sure it doesn't fall down. So you put in little battens or nails, and then you just place it in. So it can be a DIY job, but it's obviously you need to take all your floorboards up, which is not it's just quite disruptive.
Thank you. And also, were your radiators replaced by the underfloor heating, or were they supplemented?
Downstairs they were replaced, so got rid of all the radiators downstairs. Upstairs were new radiators, but yeah, because I was moving them anyway, it made sense to upgrade them.
And then we've got a few questions coming through. This is probably relevant for both of you. Someone's asking about kind of like behaviour changes. Did you make any, like, just to think about your solar generation and also like your battery and things?
I didn't make any particular changes because we've been sort of changing as we go along. As soon as I realised that irons take an awful lot of electricity, I stopped ironing, but this was some time ago, and so on and so forth. And also, we tend to cook. If we're cooking something for a long time or in the oven, then it's in the daytime when the sun's shining and we use what we generate. But it's lucky because we're retired, you can, you know, change your timetable of your day, not open to everyone.
And did you notice any differences in the quality of the heat with the heat pump and the underfloor heating? For example, like controlling the heating and things?
For me, actually, my controls before I got the heat pump were really bad. So I only had the timer on the boiler itself. I didn't have a house or room thermostat. So, and I had a lodger in the room where the boiler was. So it was actually quite difficult, and I just left it on the timer, which meant that sometimes it could be too hot and sometimes it could be too cold. So now I've got 4 thermostats in the house, and it's made it a lot easier to control. So it's a better experience overall.
Great, thank you. Someone's asking, so they said that they put foam insulation in their roof, but they weren't really that happy with it. Does anyone have any advice on any suitable replacements? Maybe that's one for you, Jack.
Yeah, I did see that question. I don't quite know how you would actually remove the foam insulation, to be perfectly honest. I mean, there's lots of alternatives to it as you're installing it, but I unfortunately wouldn't be able to comment on how to remove it once it's already installed. It is quite, I think that's why it's a bit, yeah, that's why it can make it a bit difficult to sell the property, because it's can be a bit of an issue. But yeah, alternatives to it in general is just sort of standard mineral wool, which most people will probably be already aware of, or wood fiberboard, or cellulose, which can be made from recycled paper. But yeah, sorry, I can't recommend how to get rid of it.
Thank you. And we've got another question just around, do you think it's kind of best to consider both PV and heat pump as like a combination solution?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're generating electricity in the winter, if it's a sunny day and but it's cold, then that energy can then be used by the heat pump to heat your home. I mean, there is a little bit of an inverse relationship with when you want to be heating your property and when you're most likely to be generating a lot of electricity. So in the winter, obviously you're generating less electricity, but you will be generating some. So that will be used. And also in summer, you will be still using your heat pump to heat your water. So that electricity will be used for that. So yeah, it's a good combination, I would say.
So just to add to that, before I got the battery, I in the summer restricted the hot water with the timer on the controls so that it would only heat up in the middle of the day, so that I could maximize the amount of solar I was using. And the batteries really helped to maximize the use of that with the hot water and the heating. But you can also get an immersion diverter, which puts any excess solar electricity into your hot water cylinder, and that's pretty cheap when you install the heat pump.
Do you have a PV divert, Matt?
No, I was going to put it in, but it wasn't compatible with the extra monitoring that I was going to put in, and then I got the battery anyway. So the battery, you could have a battery and a diverter, but it's a bit they compete a little bit.
Yeah, thanks.
Great, thank you. And there's another question coming through for you, Matt. Just if you have any idea on when like the payback period will be for your measures, and just because someone noticed that there wasn't a lot of savings in your bills quite yet. So when do you think maybe you might see those coming through?
I just saw Judith. Did you want to say something in the last question?
Yes. Sorry, I wanted to say that we have one electric shower, and so we don't actually use hot water, because if you think about it, your dishwasher does the heating, the washing machine does the heating, and so on. So we haven't had enough experience to see about what the bills are going to be like. We have no idea because we've only just finished doing all this. But definitely in the summer, the temperature is right down, and the heat pump apparently just goes on to stop Legionnaire's disease or something. So that was it. Thanks.
The question was about payback. So the feed-in tariff has helped pay back the solar panels already. That was quite generous. I think they would still be paying back if it was just based on the export on its own. The heat pump, my boiler was at the end of its life anyway. So if you think I was going to have to spend £3 grand or something regardless on a new heating system, then that substantially reduces the difference between what I actually paid and what I would have been paying otherwise.
There was, Charlotte, just to jump in, there was a question quite early on about whether the funding that Jack mentioned was available for people in housing association properties. As my understanding is that depends on whether your local authority have applied for certain pots of money. But Jack, do you want to just mention anything about which kind of housing the funding's available for?
Sorry, I can't see the question. Was that for the HUGS funding, or was that for ECO?
It was. I think it's about whether the ECO and the boiler upgrade scheme are available to housing association tenants. I guess it might make a difference on exactly the nature of your contract with your housing provider. Yeah,
I think, well, for HUGS, that's for homeowners, so that's not that wouldn't be applicable. ECO, which is the energy company obligation, I think would still be applicable, because you can still get it even in private rented properties as well. So I think that is can be used in that context. And yeah, again, boiler upgrade scheme, it is for homeowners. So yeah, I think you wouldn't be. I don't think you would qualify actually. In fact, I think it explicitly says not for housing association for boiler upgrade scheme. I think it was. I'll have a look. Julie who asked that question. If you're in the southwest, then do feel free to get in touch with CSE if you are having problems with the housing association. We might be able to help.
Yeah, back to you, Charlotte.
All right, thank you. I'm just having a look through the chat. Someone's asking about sort of comparing like an air source heat pump to a gas boiler in terms of kind of like prices and stuff. Because electricity is 4 times the price of gas unless you generate a lot yourself. Is that true? I don't know, maybe.
So the heat pump will generate heat about between 200 and 400% efficiency compared to a boiler. So that offsets the higher price that you pay for the electricity. But the more that you can get from the solar panels, you know, that's free electricity once you paid for the panels. So that will help reduce the cost as well.
Sounds great, thank you. Are electric boilers a suitable replacement for combi gas boilers to reduce carbon?
Is that direct electric boilers would be very, very expensive to run, apart from the you know, the carbon emissions related to it. I don't think it would be a very marginal, if any, improvement on emissions, but it would be incredibly expensive to run if you're just going for direct electric heating. So yeah, that wouldn't be sort of recommended. Heat pumps, as Matt said, you know, have a vastly improved efficiency as they take some of the low grade heat from their from wherever they're taking it from, either the air or the ground. So that improves both the carbon efficiency and the cost efficiency of running them. So yeah, that's why they're the one to go for.
There were a couple of questions about hot water tanks. I wondered if you, Judith and Matt, you wanted to just say did you have to change the hot water tank, and where were you able to put it? Was there any logistical or practical issues around that?
Yeah, we actually had a cupboard, which was an airing cupboard, with the old gas boiler on the outside wall. So it was a kind of in an alcove, as they do, you know, alcove, fireplace, alcove in the bedroom. And we took the boiler out and put the whole caboose in. It's very complicated. I look at it and think, oh, heavens, how does that work? But it's okay, I've got a leaflet about it. So it's a bit of a trial, not having an airing cupboard, but we're looking for solutions.
Into dining room, and the understairs cupboard was where it made sense to put the hot water cylinder. But because I was removing the kitchen wall, the quality of the understairs cupboard was so poor that basically had to replace the whole thing. So it was quite disruptive, but there was disruption anyway, so it didn't make that much difference.
There's a question just came in. Jack, do you know about the about like the prices of heat pump installation? The fact that the government boiler upgrade scheme offers £5,000, have installers raised their prices as a result of that? Have we noticed anything along those lines?
Yeah, I was just typing a response to that. It's a good question. I've not heard of that happening. You can sort of see the temptation that installers might just sort of boost their prices by £5,000, but I haven't heard anything within any of our clients sort of saying that that's the case. It's only sort of just, even though it's officially launched on the 1st of April, you know, as government schemes tend to do, it's sort of only just really kicking off in the last month or so. So not that I've heard of, and hopefully there are some protections against that, but I haven't heard categorically either way, unfortunately.
I think you're on mute, Judith.
Oh. Oh dear, right. I don't think our installers did this. I mean, we came in paying under £10,000, including 4 new radiators, which improved the capacity. I thought it was terribly reasonable, and they had to do the work to claim the 5,000. So as far as I could see from what I was looking at before, they hadn't adjusted their prices for that.
Yes, it's good to know. Someone's asking about like your hot water cylinder, and is it kind of bigger than like the one that you had before? Because they still have theirs, I'm wondering if it might need replacing.
I think they typically always need replacing unless you've got a very modern cylinder, and there are compatibility issues sometimes, so often interchanging. But I think Matt, you're about to say something as well.
Yeah, I didn't have one before. I had a combi boiler, so it was new.
Thank you. I think we've answered most of the questions in the chat, but if anyone would like to raise their hand and ask a question directly, feel free to do that now.
I was going to say there was a question early on about where to locate the air source heat pump and whether you could locate it on the flat roof. Matt, I don't know if you ever considered that. I just wanted to share that from a previous webinar we held, one of their homes reported that there was some vibration from the heat pump. So you do want to think about locating it. Firstly, you have to locate it away from open windows. And secondly, if there is vibration, you want to make sure that's not going to be felt in a bedroom, for example.
Yeah, it's not actually that useful a space where it is sited. So the only reason I used it is to get to the water butts, and you can still access it. So for me, it was perfect location. If I had put it on the roof, obviously there'd be that possible vibration issue, but also you'd have to have the pipes coming down as well, which would be a bit awkward, and access for servicing would be more awkward as well.
Thank you. I can see Bob. You have your hand up.
I've got a very quick question. If you have radiators on an outside wall, is it worth putting something reflective behind the radiators to reflect the heat back into the room?
Yeah, that would be useful. For it won't affect the convected heat sort of moving through the air, which is typically how like radiators work, but it will stop some of that radiant heat, or reflect some of that radiant heat back into the room a little bit.
A little bit, thank you.
I might just jump in if I see a couple of people dropping off the call. We can run up to 15:15, but if I just share a few final comments so that everyone gets to hear them. I will just share my screen with with our contact details on it. You're very welcome to email us at communities@cse.org.uk. And we'll do our best to direct your query to the right place, or signpost you to information. Just to remind everyone that this webinar, along with the two previous ones, will be made available on CSE's YouTube channel very shortly, as well as the individual householder videos. And for any of you who are in the Bristol area and want to know a little bit more, we will be holding an event this Saturday at Future Leap on Gloucester Road from 10 till 3. So feel free to pop down there and come and ask us any questions. So and also after you leave the Zoom call, you will see a pop-up survey, as we'd really appreciate it if you just take 5 minutes to answer those questions. We do still have 5 minutes left, so if anyone did want to unmute and ask a question, then do feel free to. Can't hear anything.
I've got a quick question for Matt about the replacing some of the radiators. Was that sort of recommended by the installer at the sort of survey stage, or did you sort of think about that sort of later down the line once you've already had the? Yeah, at what point were you considering this?
They recommended it because they were quite old and they were single panel. So you got the newer radiators, tend to be wider and have a little grill on top, and so there's basically 2 panels in there, which maximizes the surface area to distribute the heat. Whereas I had kind of 30-year-old radiators, which are single panel, so they're less good for heat pumps because they can't distribute the heat as well. But I did want to move to them anyway, so it just made sense.
Great. And I've got one other very dry question about the bore of piping. Did you have to change your existing pipe work? Was it, and can you remember? I know that if you've got micro bore pipes, they pretty much don't work with heat pumps, and 15 mil piping sometimes you can get away with and sometimes you can't. So I'm interested.
They did replace most of the pipe work because the floors were up anyway, but I don't think it was micro bore. But downstairs, obviously, it was underfloor heating, so that all the piping down there went regardless. But one thing they did discover, which is maybe one thing to bear in mind when doing a big retrofit, is you'll discover some things which are unexpected. So we found woodworm in the joists, which had to be treated. So it was actually quite lucky that we found that, because that could have caused problems down the line. And also found out that my mains water pipe was lead. So I ended up spending about £1,500 digging up my front garden and changing that.
Yeah, that's a good one to spot.
If we don't have any more questions, maybe we might finish it a little early. But yeah, thank you very much to Matt and Judith for your time this evening, and also for letting us come and film in your houses. And yeah, it's been a really informative evening, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks everyone for attending. Cheers.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Cheers, bye.